Sheila here with Sirius Stellus Moon, Jupiter hour, Jupiter day. Jupiter is 18 degrees in Cancer. In the 11th house, ascendant applying to conjoin Ketu, midheaven with Uranus and Sedna. And Mercury in the 8th house with Mars in the 8th house. The Moon ruling Jupiter is separating from conjunction with Sedna and opposing Mercury and Chiron, which is a great time to talk about the opposition between Spica and Aries. Not just Spica and Chiron, but Spica and Aries Chiron that Mercury is going to conjoin. Um, we're going to look at 2036 as the year where Rahu and Ketu will be in reversal to where they are now. And we're going to look at the way that the 10-year program that is supposed to include the aftermath of a world war, of a possible world war, um, at around 2032, which basically supposed to be the aftermath of 2030. Um, a lot to consider, a lot to discuss, and as we are looking at the attempts to create unification for Uranus in Gemini, the unity culture. So I have been observing the unity culture since 2023, and indeed the topic of polarization with Uranus in Gemini um, is addressed through the creation of unity in basically Sagittarius, where we want to be benevolent, remember that we are brothers and sisters, sisters and brothers. And this is exactly where things can fall flat because with yin depletion, what we have um, is attempt to unite as brothers, forgetting the sisters component, and um, attempt to control population by boosting up the population so that there will still be citizens surviving the World War or the possible World War timelines. And at the same time, this trajectory is a yin depletion trajectory. Um, if we do not have, if we don't go by a yin depletion trajectory, and you can watch my crimes against humanity could be considered a cause of inflammation. For more information about yin depletion and yang, um, we also see China beginning to close up. People need way more documents to leave the country, and it's permeating basically wider and wider layers of society, which is another form of yin depletion. Restriction on movement is yin depletion, and but to retrieve movement, we need to nourish yin. We need to set a boundary to what harms yin, and we need to nourish yin. Where the setting boundaries is a yang that the nourished yin supports. And when we have, um, again, following the Epstein dossiers, it's way easier to discuss that because it is already out in the open. And this is also where um, retrieving the trust, retrieving the lost trust, is not done by yin depletion. Encouraging or setting a goal for doubling the population for 10 years, as I saw in many of the regions, is simply put rape. And even when we have parties with equal distribution of women, the very goal setting of increasing population or doubling population in 10 years is basically a call to rape. Now, rape, needless to say, is yin depletion even when it's not occultistic rape. This also needs to be addressed in the occult, in the spirituality, in the scriptures. Um, there's a lot to go so that the the aftermath will not be looking like with Ketu. How should I say it? With the approaching Rahu eclipses on Deneb Algedi towards 2028, 2020, I believe it's 2028, 2029, but already, or 2027, sorry, it's true, we're almost there, it's 2027, but 2028 we have, I believe, the Lilith Pluto eclipses. And then we have 2030 where Lilith is with Ketu, um, in Gemini with Saturn and Uranus. But the Rao Deneb Algedi Ketu Magha is, is indeed the big purge. However, to the people that have Rao Ketu reversal, if their role, the people that right now that have Rahu in Magha, whether it's Virgo or Aquarius, their role is to balance the yin and yang and bring that balance of yin and yang into Magha. That's a lot to transmute. Slavery is yin depletion. Any form of occultistic rape, yin depletion. Okay, there's a lot. The weight of the throne is the heaviest because this is the people that will have their 2036 is going to be a big year for it's going to be a round return, which is 2025, 2035, 2036. It's going to be a round return, and this is where the never before has the weight of the throne been so heavy, and there's a death threat underneath because Pluto is going to be already 18 degrees applying to Deneb Algedi, and wherever Ketu and Rahu are, Pluto Deneb Algedi, very simply put, means what it means. Pluto Ketu Deneb Algedi, the you know, it's a good thing that we have, yeah, Pluto Ketu Deneb Algedi is very simply put guillotine upon guillotine upon guillotine upon guillotine upon guillotine, masses of guillotines to all the people that were not bringing the yin yang balance. Um, Now, into that mix, we need to take the bigger picture into account where we have the approaching of the square or the opening square between Neptune and Pluto, the ingress of Aries to Taurus. And if previously Vogue has been Aries in Aries, and the response, the Dutch East Indias, the response of the Huguenot massacre by the Catholics, Aries was in Aries back then, and this is actually an Aries return for Vogue for Dutch East India. Now we're going to have Aries in Taurus, which is a Venus sign. It's a Yin sign. This is where we're going to be discussing later the women that were not included, for example, and the women that were not included because of occultistic rape. For example, the victims of Ghislaine Maxwell, while taking into account the restriction that both Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein, for example, had to in upbringing to emerge into yin yang balance and so on and so forth, and at the same time the absolute need to abolish occultistic rape if we wish to sustain humanity. Now, as a woman that was offered to have something like harems or to partake in power, the way I see it is power abuse, but it was seen as a form of sharing power. The reason that I rejected that, by the way, what allowed me to reject that was going from misplaced arousal to relaxed arousal. And that means no sexual fantasies. Uranus in Taurus has definitely been assisting. And this is where um, where the way the things that I saw um, within women that were partaking in that, usually as adaptive coping mechanism for being raped, which is also the case, I believe, it could be the case in men, um, or because there is also the issue of gender as coping mechanism and gender as authentic gender. I do give place to the hypothesis that we can have um, a scale of gender without ritual abuse, and the scale and the scale of gender that comes out through ritual abuse, um, and I'm being cautious of not trying to predict before actually abolishing occult abuse or occult rape, um, because I genuinely don't know. We do not know the world without rape. Now, when we talk about um, running something like a harem or the equivalent or the female equivalent of polygamy, basically there is something there that is still working on the misplaced arousal. Yeah. And the concepts there are supposed to be, um, how should I say that? It's an energy siphoning ritual, and this is something that I had the privilege to refuse to partake. Um, there was a time where I was severely tortured, and I did not understand what was going on, and I guess it was an attempt to teach me that, which I didn't learn, and I was very fortunate that I remained alive. Everything was going on the psychic realm, and um, with the objective, of course, to bring people to the physical rituals. Um, but this is also where I had seen the coping mechanism of sexual domination, where the joy of the sexuality is from the power over another. Um, and again, this is not kink shaming because, like I said, we do not know the world without rape, and I hold also a place for people to participate in exchange of power in a way that is aligned um, and there's certain things that I simply don't know. I don't know eroticism and sexuality in a world without rape. None of us knows, and this is where I had seen that the energy siphoning is basically a life threat to people, and this is why I refuse to partake in, let's say, having my own harem, or um, um, or 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 participate in something that like polygamy or anything of that sort. And this brings to the sharing of power another component, and this is where we talk about the abolition of occultistic rape from infanthood. And the basis for that is where each and every individual, nourished yin and balanced yang, is sovereign. It is also a medical philosophical ground coming from Eastern traditions with a refinement, because I do not take the note that I believe that the sky that punishes the land loses mandate of the heaven, and it's very important to the cycle of eclipses, because that's the thing that gets, if we teach yin and yang and then we teach the sky punishes the land, then it's kind of like, if I were to prescribe to you something, let's say an essential oil blend, and within that essential oil blend I would put a drop of, let's say, toxics. That's the equivalent of saying that the sky punishes the land. Now, here is the thing. When we talk about the wind and the land, definitely extreme weather doesn't look pretty. But is it a punishment of the sky to the land? And this is where um, because from those derivations, there are the derivations of men ruling over women, in the belief that they need to control cows, and actually the yin yang balance of containing one's own, which takes a lot of yin nourishment, regardless of gender, um, is a practice of presence, and any yang punishes yin, basically um, creates inflammation. It creates oscillation in yin that are water depletion and fluid, and in yang it creates inflammation, excessive violence, and as well emasculation. Just naturally, if we are, if we think about Aries as explosive power, it's trying to do explosive power for long duration, which would deplete yang and emasculate um, the person, even if that's a woman, for example. Um, now, this is where, when we talk about the transition of Rao Ketu and 2036 as the reversal, right now it's kind of it's strange to say, but it's kind of easier in Magha. Why? Because the Epstein list is out there. We have testimonies of survivors. We have testimonies of survivors of ritual abuse that were tortured, were supposed to be breeders, were supposed to be Epsteins. We have almost everything it takes to account for a person exiting a situation where they participated in crime against humanity since childhood and receive all the defenses if we tend to abolish occultistic rape and address the nature of occultistic rape as challenging to due process. What are we missing? The how to go from here to there. And this is exactly Rao and Ketu. It's the tail of the dragon and the head of the dragon. It was a dragon that was cut in half, and then we're like, okay, we have the tail, we have the head. How do we connect the dots? How do we prevent, let's say, people that receive this abundance of grace, protection, chance to retrieve their own soul into their body, and allow that to be, um, and not create a division between, hey, those are the people that were smuggled out of the cult and got to even speak, where the people within the cult try to do the best while they have to commit crime against humanity, and some of them had to had transformed to believing that their nature is such that could absolutely be a coping mechanism. And how do we um, prevent cases of um, those crimes still continuing and perpetuating new victims? And while if we are taking a more strict notion, it's basically leaving a lot of people in that actually want out. And those would be the people that weren't lucky enough to have, I don't know, let's say a Neptune trine or something that assists and facilitates them escaping the cult as a child. Um, and it also touches on the questions of nature and nurture, quite vehemently on the role of the astrological chart, or human design, or whatever people see, um, and the amount of faith versus the amount um, of basically ability to spirit or ability to alter that. Um, and this is when we talk about unification of the sects, we also have to keep in mind that the goal of unifying the sects from the courtesan Hellenistic division, which is where men began to practice their ability to bring children or their role in childbirth that they weren't aware of before, by raping women. And again, it's not that they weren't raping before, it's that fertility and rape was exercised um, in that fashion. And when we think about unifying the sex, kind of like it's obvious that when we don't have yin depletion and when we have healthy yin, healthy yang, then the day and night sects harmonize. Um, Definitely, when we think about the elements like fire depleted by water, is also a thing to keep in mind when we talk about the unification of the sex. We're not going to lose completely the distinction and the effects that the elements have on one another. Um, and and the fact that we are moving from a world where the foundation of everything we know was originating mostly in yin depletion, excessive yang inflammation, and then emasculation, which is yang depletion, and excessive yin, which would give us a sense of a fluid, which is also part of the balance itself. Some of you have watched my videos when I was tending to a chronic issue of inflammation that became basically a sort of a fungi or a sort of, and talking about the emotions of disgust, the um, difficulty to 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 deal as we are, and kind of like to deal as we go. Um, Now, this is where the Magha Nakshatra or Regulus Deneb Algedi um, have it on their it's kind of like it's on them to bring about that balance that is both within, but it's also within a lineage. And these people are usually fatedly involved with the topic of extortion cults, whether it's because they grew into that or because it has affected them since infanthood. And um, um, and this is also how come they are. It's kind of like when we think about the French Revolution and we think about guillotine o'clock. Yes, some monarchies managed to escape, but basically we're thinking about literally decapitation. The only type of regime where a leader can step out and go to the grocery store or ride a bike home is democratic regime that is actually democratic. And everything since age zero is done to corrupt that, to try to weaken the bloodlines, um, while even with decentralization there is attempt to control all of the systems. And this is why we see the challenges where people think about unity, and the unity is basically, if Gemini is of two minds about things, then the truth, what is the cohesive truth? The cohesive truth has to do with a balance of yin and yang. Air, and Gemini, Sagittarius is air and fire, both of them yang. And this is where we run the risk of yin depletion, and but those that don't pay attention to that on time would either have a Pyrrhus win or would have a tremendous fiasco upon Aldebaran. If Antares is the psychic protection and health and wisdom, Aldebaran is the material. And here we also needed to understand, as a person with natal Rahu Ketu in Gemini and Sagittarius, um, it's not about losing. We do not get material gain without the wisdom and the, okay, or if we do get material gain without the wisdom and the alignment, we basically don't enjoy the win. We basically have a Pyrrhus win. And I say that as a person who is 42, which is approaching to materializing my Rahu, and there are many things. It's not for nothing that, there are many things that were there on the table, and this is where um, the that alignment, that move, materializing in from materializing from and into a perspective of healthy yin, healthy yang, is going to also tell me what is the exact, what are the material things that are relevant to me, and um, and how do I maintain a healthy lifestyle and healthy circle, um, also when materializing around Rohini. um, and so um, there is a current there, and the current there is with Alcyone, which I addressed in a series, and this is the right to be a girl. Um, but also the right to be a girl as yin honoring, um, which is um, also abolishing of any abolition of occultistic rape is abolishing of yin depletion from infanthood, ability to develop a healthy sense of self regardless of the gender. Okay, and that can also begin to, um, I'm not saying transcend, but I see a lot of definitions that challenge the gender notions, and I love seeing that. That is completely new to me. And a part of Gemini is both the binary and transcending the binary, or um, from a place that is not occultistically abusive. Now, one of my greatest discoveries was that Aries has to do with um, the gnosis of abolishing occultistic rape, and nearly any major scientist or contributor to society have tackled that directly or indirectly. And this is part of the secrets to success, by the way, because if we abolish occultistic rape, we can find our origin, particularly with Aries in Aries. And find our origin is find our original ideas, and um, that is something that is in touch with the spirit of the times, in touch with the 550 or 526 year cycle. Um, and, um, and Aries is in everybody's chart. It is ruled by Mars. As of the 50s, it's going to be ruled by Venus. What do I think about the attempts to upjump the population? What would be the alternative? And the alternative to me would be tending to abolish the issue of occultistic rape and grow nourishing of yin, nourishing of yang, nourishing of feminine, nourishing of masculine. Or we're gonna it's something that becomes a habit. And 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 of course taking into account that we hadn't grown in that world. Um, and 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 everything that I've learned was basically by people that did not have um, that privilege that I have following the release of the Epstein dossiers, to have a discussion that within most circles would end up in torture and decapitation, and without us even knowing that, because we, the people outside these circles, would see Marie Antoinette, but we would not see who raped her in childhood and does mind control. We would not have the paradigm in spirit and in matter and in science to even assume that such a thing could take over. Or we would be ascribed to, if it would be a spiritual paradigm, we would be believing that the demiurge is operating through Marie Antoinette, or we would have a dogmatic materialism where we would believe that, oh, she made her choices and so on and so forth. And this is and the awareness of what is behind choice, that can be um, it can be frightening, but it is also a part of um, addressing the fact that if a person, let's say, when I was in high school, we were taught that, I think I don't remember if it was during the 50s or the 60s, they tried water discipline, and basically people died. And we also know that depletion causes challenges in decision making. Um, and um, and yet awareness can be another point of intervention or point of interference. And I coined the term point of interference because it's not about control. It's about um, finding the places where we can be an agent in the system without succumbing to discussing absolute choice. Now, um, remediation point for Rao Magha and Ketu Deneb Algedi. We would be talking about the end of Gemini, the beginning of Cancer, as the sextile point of Thales. Um, we would be talking about the end of labor, definitely Spica. Now it brings me to the point of we would be talking about the end of Capricorn, beginning of Aquarius. Um, a little note about the 12th house. The hour in which one is born tells us the ascendant to which we can see the 12th house. Um, I've had the honor to be in a situation where at least three people had the somebody's, let me see it from my chart, um, somebody's 8th house is somebody's 12th house, and somebody's um, for all the three. And today I had this eureka, and I was like, my God. And I think pretty much all three of us saw each other in kind of in our worst and our best, because because the 12th house is our blind spot, and this is where we are also projecting the most, because we really don't know if it's an hidden ally or a hidden enemy. Um, and the 8th house, which is everything that was wiped under the rug. Never met these people in person, and yeah, it is funny because this is following a decade where we would have where I had a close friendship where we were in each other's 12th house, and and therefore it was very challenging. When the minute there was a yin depletion, it became very, very challenging. The way that they would get to separate that, if they would manage to create a situation of yin depletion, which would force me um, to be dominant, or to take up the masculine, and this was where that masculine would leave the so this is something that um, this is something kind of to keep in mind, because if we know the element of our 12th house, so air and fire would be yang, which is Aquarius, Aries, Gemini, Virgo, no, Aquarius, Aries, Gemini, Libra, and Sagittarius, whereas water and earth would be yin, and that would be the rest of the signs, and this is, oh, Leo, of course. Um, Leo feeling left out. um, and this is where, um, and this is where, how should I say that? Um, if the blind spot is of a young nature, then the issue of our hidden enemy could be yin depletion, but it could also be the issue of our hidden ally. And so our blind spot is, do we have a yin depletion? If this is a yin issue, we could have an overflow of yin. And so this could be issues of emasculation that operate basically in the blind spot. Um, and of course, each person have their own chart, but this is talking about just a place where we have the blind spot. So, for example, a Ghislaine Maxwell would have to be operating in a toxic femininity and an inflamed yang, because she could never connect with a relaxed arousal, um, only with the closest approximate, where she would need to use that to be the closest approximate, and then kind of like to switch into kind of like a bait situation, occultistically, which is it's kind of like she got to work through the system, but the system was corrupt, and yet that is what was, and this is also when we talk about um, inclusion of women. It would not be suffice with the 2030 barrier, with the 2036 barrier, this year's barrier, next year's barrier, and the 2036 barrier. It would not be suffice to just include the same number of women. We actually have to honor yin, and this is where women run the risk of yin depletion, which Tradwife doesn't resolve. It's still yin depletion. Um, and this also affects the topic of the scriptures, which would take us to the Neptune square Pluto, and the importance of the the written word, not just the law, but also the written word that inspires the law, which is the holy texts that must be changed in a way that nourishes yin and is a good balance with the yin and yang, because there is no one world religion if the basis is yin depletion or yang depletion. Now you would tell me, but surely that entire thing was invented to throw the world off balance. I don't know what was that invented for, but I learned from, um, actually we have our own Dana Ariely, not the Dana Ariely of Davos, our own Dana Ariely, and a professor, and then from him I learned that when there is an argument, it's also my natural inclination, but he's more kind of intellectual. He's more of a speaker, intellectually eloquent. I don't have his chart, and I am more of an Aries, Aries Mercury, um, which opposite speaker. This is also why the juristic procedure was not accessible to me, because my Mercury opposes speaker, and my Mercury is in Andromeda constellation, so it is the constellation of reconciliation, but it's not the reconciliation of Spica. Um, it is a reconciliation that comes after abolishing occultistic rape, which affect also the jurisdiction, the jurisdiction, and the scriptures. Um, and so, yeah. Now, here is the thing. I do believe in arguing for the truth, where everything that's not the naive truth, just 9/11 around itself, even if it was benevolent, then it would be like, oh, okay, you meant that benevolently because you try to be speak on, you try to be eloquent, and and so and um, that is something where discerning the truth um, is essential. And when we talk about, let's say, what is the issue with Chinese people not being able to get out of the country, and of course it matters when we think about the one world government. What's happening in China is what's happening in the world. So even if we do not ascribe to the ethereal, um, holistic perception of mundane politics, then very practically there are attempts to make a one world government and to unify the world. Even monotheism is basically an attempt to make a one world religion. Very very simply put, one God, um, and that can only be in a situation that does not deplete yin, and yet looking where, for example, if it's business people that have to file a lot of bureaucratic issues to the government in order to get out of China, where are they in the yin depletion? Are they in rituals to do yin depletion? Because what's happening with extortion cults is that um, it creates that excess inflammation. The point is for the people to undermine themselves, and then they are exposing their own self undermining. And this is one of the things that really concern the Deneb Algedi to Regulus axis, and um, which, now that I think about my lot of divination, 29 degrees Scorpio, remediates. It's quite a brave move to look with discernment and clarity through the Bermuda Triangle, the triangle unified with the North Sea of the skies. Oh, okay, got my central rules. It's actually important.